Real Talk with Tina and Ann. I am Ann, and Tina will be back soon. In this episode, we're going to be covering a lot of different things, but some of the things we're going to be touching on is taking our pain and overcoming through music and choosing your path in the midst of pain and chaos. We will talk about who is in charge of your life and making a difference in others' lives by giving us purpose. Mikey has a lot to talk about in this episode. I am so excited to have you, Mikey Silas, on this podcast. I have wanted you on for a very long time. I am very grateful.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ann. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mikey, you formed a band out of Cleveland, Ohio, Apostle Jones. It is made up of incredible musicians from all over Cleveland. Am I right?
That's correct. Yes.
To let our listeners know a little bit about the awards that you guys have won, and it will tell them a little bit about who you are and your band. Over the course of the last 4 years, you have won Best Blues Band in 2024, Best Band for 3 years, Top Music Artist, Best Vocalist, Best Singer-Songwriter. Two of your bandmates who are also in their own group, Mixed Feeling, just won Best R&B this year in Cleveland. And you have personally won Most Interesting Person in Cleveland in 2024 from Cleveland Magazine. And you have only been around since about 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I moved back to Cleveland from Chicago in 2016.
Okay.
Took about a couple years to sort of recalibrate, and then really started getting rolling with the band right before the shutdown and the pandemic and
All right.
the whole shift in the world. And then during 2020, there was I'm sure we'll touch on this at some point, but I lost my father that year. As
I'm
the
sorry.
world, thank you. As the world was sort of figuring out what was going on, whatever, how things were going to be new in a new sort of like social climate and everything like that. And I think we had the decision at that point whether to just kind of like sit back and wait for things to reopen, or but we had built such like a strong connection with music and being in the community that it was hard to let that go at first. So
Mm-hmm.
2020, once some of the stuff with my father sort of took I'm going to say calm down, but he passed away and we kind of moved into like the next phase of how to manage as a family and stuff like that. We ended up booking gigs and everything that were kind of like unheard of at that time. So we started doing these little restaurant gigs, some indoors and everything like that. And we kind of like worked through that period in an active way. I think we all decided, like, we kind of locked ourselves in our practice space and in our own little bubble at the time, and decided, we'll take gigs even if there's no pay for it. We really just want to play. For me, it was a very healing thing for me to be able to go out and play, because music was one of those ways where I feel closer to spirit.
Right.
And so we kind of worked through that pandemic period. And then the band really kind of started to evolve from there. And eventually, as things started to get more normalized through that period, we started the elements of the band that it now exists, started to really come into play. So since 2019, the band has grown immensely. But that was really the year when things started to sort of come into focus for the group Apostle.
Here's a sample of Mikey and Apostle Jones.
It's a process or a journey, whichever word you choose. I'm sorry what I said and I'm sorry what I do. I'm sorry for the worry and I'm sorry it got hectic. The call from the sheriff, it got weird, I got frantic. Forgiving myself, forgiving you too, but I'm always feeling sorry for real. I'm glad you found love and I'm glad you found your way. I'm glad you're here, but baby, still look the same. I know you're different, you're grateful when you lose, and I'm grateful when I win, and I'm grateful because I choose. Turn it up and repeat it again. Oh, yeah. Turn it up. Turn it up and repeat it again. Oh, yeah.
Special this band is. And look at all that you have accomplished in such a short time. And my friend, I really believe that you guys are just getting started. You don't do anything halfway, do you?
You're asking someone who's like a procrastinating perfectionist. So
I
I always
love
think I
that.
could do something a little better, a little bit more effort, a little bit stronger. But I definitely, the one thing that I do all the way is, hope, believe, and trust. I think that really plays a lot into the process of putting stuff out there and letting sort of like letting it evolve and become what it needs to become on its own sometimes. But in terms of when we get on stage, nah, there's no crowd too small, there's no crowd too big, there's no audience member greater than the other. That
Mm.
everyone it's all about living fully in that moment.
And you guys do. I say this all the time that you guys are so much more than a band. You're an experience. I
Hey,
mean,
like that.
every single time I have been to one of your concerts, it feels, and if I can say it like this, like you're a bunch of misfits that are gathering together to love and encourage and pay forward your joy to others. And I feel like I just went to hippie church. You,
Let's go.
I
Let's
mean,
stay
you
there.
you call it rock and soul, and I think that that pretty much defines you.
It's funny that you bring that up because genre is one of those things we really struggle with. And the reason why I say struggle is because it is important for marketing and algorithms and
Sure.
playlists and
Yeah.
short bio listings and explaining to somebody what it is they're about to see or what did you see while you were there. So to find sort of those categories that can kind of sum it all up has been um, not the easiest thing to do, especially because we do have, like you said, a group of of divine misfits. I'll say everyone's,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
It's
but
perfect.
but to have like that, to have that strong mix where I think it's important to always strive for authenticity and honesty in what you do. I think even if it takes you to a vulnerable place, because I think that's really where a lot of the connection happens.
Go
Walk
ahead.
down the street and be like, hey girl, hey, hey, and just walk about your way. Not you're connecting, you're saying hi, but you're not really connecting. You say, hey,
Right.
girl, hey, ooh, that outfit reminds me of somebody that I knew one time. It is gorgeous. And then they ask, well, who was it? Oh, it was my best friend from when I was little. All of a sudden you're starting to form a little bit of a deeper connection. So I think something we strive for as a group is to create that conversation with that experience you're talking about, where it's not just come, get your tickets, sit down, leave. Like
No, not at
if
all.
like it is a very reciprocal thing. Like what you feel you're getting, I think it has to exist on both sides. So yeah, it's like we've had some lovers like that. I'm sure they had a good time, but where was I? Sorry, forgive me for that. But
I say this too all the time. I mean, you guys are so deep and raw, and all of your band members have been through life and then some, and it shows on the stage. I sense a deep trust amongst all of you, and when you get up there and put it all out there for everyone to see, can you share a little bit more about your origins and the rawness of your message and what connects all of you with each other and the audience? Like, how did all of this come about?
yeah, it's interesting because it's a very layered onion to peel, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not that it stinks, but but is the way that we've all met each other has been through circumstances. Like there's not a lot of courting. A lot of it has been attraction rather than promotion in some respects. I'll give a couple examples. So Michael Haberay and I, so this is that 2020 year, when the world was shut down. We were all kind of like, confined to our houses or our bubbles or whatever. I had just moved into a new apartment after staying with my mom for 7 months to help through that transition period while things were up in the air for a while. And every day, I always trust the universe too. So there's a reason for everything. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be like
Mm-hmm.
crazy about it,
Yep.
but I feel
I
like if you're
believe that.
seeing somebody all the time, have that conversation with them.
Right,
Hey,
right.
why is our energy being drawn towards each other like this right now? So
Yep.
Michael was one of those guys who, about the same time every day, would walk by the house, walk by the house. And I was smoking cigarettes at the time. And I lived near the gas station was a couple blocks away. So Michael would walk there to pick up his smokes, and I'd be on my front little stoop on the corner place we had. And he would walk by. And one day I said, "Oh, I have to ask you." I said, "Excuse me." He was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" And I said, just, I need to know, what is your sign, as in zodiac sign? Because I'm a big astrology person. So I started with my deep question, what's your sign, baby? Libra. And I was like, ooh, a Libra. And he said, what day? And then I won't go into all the details of zodiac stuff right now, but where his Libra placement is in terms of his birthday is in very like kind of fulcrum point on my own chart, which is symbolic of structure and transformation. So I was like, ooh, you could be important. And I was like, what do you do? He's like, well, I'm a musician. I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, I play guitar. I went to CSU. I said, CSU? That makes some, there's every musician I know that went to CSU is a fantastic musician. So anyway, so
Right.
check. And then at that time, that group that kind of marched into the pandemic with each other was
Mhm.
starting to show signs of like stress and fracture in terms of like a unity amongst that group at that time. None of those members from that period are still in the group now. So
Oh, okay.
Michael kind of ushered in a new era with the band, if you will, the one that looks more like the band today. So Mike, we just met randomly. It was just kind of universe stuff where it was like, oh, the energy was right. He was a guitar player. He hadn't been playing in a while. And I think that's a theme you kind of see within a lot of the relationships in the band, is that there is an element of some sort of recovery in their life, whether it be an
Mm,
emotional recovery, recovery of self, of purpose, a recovery of certain areas in their life, whether it be
mhm,
through finding a creative path again after a destructive period in your personal space and
mhm.
relationships. You can kind of see that almost systematically through everyone in the band. They're new to a new way of living a life that they're choosing to live now, or able to choose, might be a better way to say it. The longest tenured member of the band at the current moment is a saxophone player named Charlie Wilson. Um,
Okay.
and he's the one person who kind of snuck into that five piece that went into the pandemic together. So Charlie's been around the longest. I can kind of go through these stories with each of the individual members, but I think that
Right.
there's a certain freedom and breaking of chains, if you will, that kind of has happened with a lot of the members in the band. And I think that sort of manifests and turns into the music and the experience that we cultivate. Because I think, to sum all that up, I think after a period of in your life where you feel like you've only seen the trouble, or you've only seen the
Mm,
difficult, or you've
right.
perceived things to be that way, you have a choice to get bitter, or you can get better. And
Oh, I
I
like that.
feel like we look for
Mm,
that betterment not only in ourselves, but because we do that first for us, we can do it for
mhm,
each other. So I
mhm.
think there has to be some sort of a maturation or period in your life. I'm not saying you have to go through that to sort of enlightened in that way, but I think it really helps, especially when you have a large group setting, or something that requires a lot of collaboration across the board with people.
Yeah, you can tell that you guys really know how to work well together. Like, again, I come back to that word misfits, but you bring them all together and you guys are just making beautiful music out of all the pain in my life. And I've had a lot too. The one thing that saved me, and it was also the most consistent thing in my life, was music.
Yeah.
And, I was like that grunge Nirvana girl who connected with it because I was an outcast. So, what has music done for you over periods of time, from like young Mikey's relationship with music till now?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been around in my life. It really has. I mean, I have pictures of me as a 6-year-old dressed up with a curtain rod, singing into it like it's a microphone. And I
That's
was,
awesome.
I was, I loved it so much. And then it always was there. I feel like, especially as sort of and this is probably a different conversation, but I think it will lead back to what your question was. But it's like as a gay man, there's like a certain, not even just as me, but in general, in a very in a society that has very heteronormative expectations and values sort of built into it, it's hard sometimes as an alternative person to the norm, if you will, or a queer person, to
Mm-hmm.
under, to have that sense of what makes you normal, like what makes you not successful, but do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a good job? Do you have a wife and kids? Do you have a mortgage and stuff like that? Like those types of questions aren't, we can't do a yes or no answer and feel like we fit in or feel like we have something. So I feel like for a lot of queer people, you spend a lot of your life trying to not only deprogram a sense of what we're kind of growing up with, which is like Disney princess and prince, family values and stuff like that that are sort of
Mm-hmm.
truly expressed in a job career and you know the credit and the debt you sign up for to live a good American life or whatever. But it we need to kind of look for different things. It's getting different. I'll caveat this and say it's getting a little different now that there's a little bit more social
Mm-hmm.
awareness and acceptance. But
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, that was, Ellen had just come out on TV,
Okay.
Bridge was out. So there was a breaking of all that a little bit.
Okay.
Um, but I think to have that sense of I need to find myself and understand like what is my identity in the situation. And I don't think it's like a matter of not knowing who I am, but just like not being able to have sort of like a rubrics that I can like go and check. And am I doing a good job? Am I a good person if I don't have these sort of like, can I fit in with people? So music and art in general, you could throw theater in there too, was
Mm-hmm.
always a place where that self-expression could come out. I could find a song and if I didn't know how to express myself or how to be somewhere, someone might have been singing a song or wrote a song or was on the radio that that made me feel good. It made me feel safe. It made me feel comfortable in my skin, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think as I've evolved, my relationship with music has continually evolved. And I think even from a little kid, like lip syncing or belting out like the tapes and the records that my dad had, to going into theater because I didn't really understand musicianship that much, but I could understand singing songs because that's kind of what I grew up doing. So
Mm-hmm.
theater was kind of like a nice little outlet to kind of be engaged in the arts without
Mm-hmm.
needing to have any sort of, I don't come from a musical family per se, like, but I'm blue collar dad, painted houses, wallpaper. My mom worked as a nurse and my brother played sports. It's just my older brother played sports. So I mean, I kind of grew up in a very different. I played sports too growing up. I love sports.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like to have sort of, as I went through all those without having a sort of musical guide, I had to sort of find my own path in music.
Sure.
I'm still to this day still discovering things. I'm actually sitting at a piano right now where I'm taking piano lessons now because I never really took them on a regular or consistent basis at all
Okay.
growing up. So now I'm getting curious about some other elements of, how to play things and how to do things differently, how to expand those areas of musicality. That's something I'm definitely always interested in because it's something I feel like it's a lifelong journey. And I got a late start in terms of like,
Mm.
cool, let me get into this. Let me get into like the songwriting and crafting and recording and releasing music. So some people say, "Oh, Pastor Jones has done an album yet." I'm like, "Well, baby, I'm still figuring out how to record an album and write it down and get all these people in the studio and what's acceptable." Because again, it's like with me growing up, not really having like the perfect idea of what it means to have like a happy life per se. Creating your own happy has been a lifelong
Mm.
mission
Mm.
for me. And working with the band and having an unusually large band in an unusually tighter market with a lot of people who, with a city, I think in Cleveland that has a mentality of like of if you aren't working hard, then you aren't going to get it. And that can be exhausting sometimes. But trying to find ways to now get an album done that has a range to it that makes sense for the band. And I think that's important as I sort of talk aloud and process this with you right now. I think it's important to understand, for me to understand too, that's just like figuring it out as I go and using resources and using what might be deemed like a weakness or a shortcoming in some capacity. Like shortcoming being you have a large band, they're harder to mobilize. You have a large band, it's harder to it's harder to get everyone focused on the same thing at the same time. And instead of using that as like I can't get this done, trying to find ways to stay engaged and active and still productive creatively is kind of where I think this past year and a half or so has really been a large focus for me. And I think we're coming out of it with the right idea. So we're recording now, but it's not everyone all the time. Smaller little groups cutting tracks and doing stuff like that in order to be successful. So we're gonna hopefully have an album. No, I don't like the word hope in this context. We're gonna have an album, and it's gonna have those layers to it that I think will make it interesting, even if it's not conventional in a normal music create release sense.
I've always been that square trying to fit into a circle kind of thing. I never fit in. I was always the one that was different in the room. So I kind of understand that, but I also have been on this path where, I've started this podcast later in life and everything. I mean, it's always been a journey to where I've gotten to. But there's this saying that uh Hoda Kotb, I don't know if you know who she is, but she has this saying that she always says, right on time. So, even though you might be physically older than some of the other people that have done this or whatever, I mean, it has gotten you to where you are right in this moment in time. And it is right on time that this is where you're supposed to be. And this is what you're supposed to be doing.
I have a book next to my bed. It's been there for years, and it's There's Always Time for Greatness. Do you know this book?
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, it has a different number for ages 1 through 100 or something on each page. And then on each page, it lists what was accomplished by someone in a
See?
historical way or whatever,
Hmm.
um, at that age. So it's like Bill Withers didn't make his first record until he was 36 years old. Michelangelo completed the Da Vinci or the Sistine Chapel at age 33. So it's like we had a lot of
Yeah.
these sort of where it's like, there's always time for greatness. And then
Yeah, I
it's
just interviewed a guy
philosophy.
that was 75 years old last week. And I mean, he's planning things into his 80s. I mean, he's got all these amazing things planned. It's never too late.
No, never.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just posted something about like, just there's a certain superpower that comes with just trusting in all things timing.
Mm,
It's just one of the things that I think, because I think in the industry too, there's a whole element around why haven't you achieved this yet? And kind of to go off what you were saying, or like you don't have these type of numbers. Everything gets real
mm.
statistic and analytics driven, if you will. So then you kind of fall into that sort of rut and that vein a little bit. You start to realize, like, you know what, if it's meant to be, it's not going to pass you by. And that's been sort of like a mantra I've had
Mm,
for
I love
years.
that.
So if it doesn't come right now, don't worry about it too much. So it helps slow you down in a brain that wants to race to the finish line all the time.
Oh gosh, I love that. That is so well said.
Well,
You
thank you.
know, I I'm a writer, and so I can relate to a lot of the things that you're saying in a way, but with writing and singing, your angst and overcoming and joy into the universe is how I see your group. And it's kind of put a twist on your life of having purpose. So, what would you say your purpose is?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm not sure, but I do think that there's an element of the word that keeps coming to my mind is freedom. I'm dancing around telling a story right now. I'm like, um, I have a whether it's I don't think it's martyrdom at all, but it's like I noticed at a certain point maybe with some sort of like God-given charisma or something like that. You know, I seem to always attract certain relationships. I'm talking about relationships now, to my life where it's like I remember one gentleman in particular was not super social, was kind of like, oh, I'll just be use graphic words. Like he was nerdy, he was dorky, super smart, not an outcast, but not really in type of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I was fitting in pretty nicely. You know, I was able to sort of navigate and network my way through the sort of Chicago theater community I was in at the time. And we started dating, and like he eventually kind of like by the end of the relationship, we sort of flip-flop places, if you will. Like he was doing fine, had all the friends, doing all this good stuff, feeling great about things, and I left the relationship feeling kind of like, oh man, I got to start over, da, 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 do this. I don't know if these people like me anymore, blah blah blah. And while it sounds kind of bad, I also knew that I would be fine, you know, and that so there
Mm.
was this element of like, man, you know, I could feel real crappy and real bad about like the way this all went down and where I am at the end of that equation, if you will. But like I knew I'd be good and I knew I'd be
Mm-hmm.
fine. And if I could help him progress in his life in a way where he gets a little confidence, this plays into
Okay.
what
Okay.
like motivation is with the band right now. But like if I could help him find his I don't know what's the word, his swag or the way that he just wants to live his best life and he feels like he is, and I got to take a hit, I'll be back. You know, I'll come back strong. I know I will. You know, like I would absorb that, kind of like that Rogue character from X-Men. You know, she absorbs all the life force from somebody, not like an energy vampire, but like she would absorb someone's sickness, if you will, and she would fall down and like, Wolverine, I can't do it, Gambit, you know. but but like but in a way, just sort of like this idea of like, you know, whatever your sorrow is, whatever is haunting you, you know, I can handle it for you. You know, just give it to me, and you can go on and be your best self. So it sounds a little psychotic maybe, but
No, no.
but I
I mean,
think the way
I've been that
that
person that's always like absorbed other people's things. And I wanted to be there for them. What ends up happening is, I mean, it really weighs you down and it adds to everything else that you have. So it's being able to let go of that pain, I guess. I'm one of the things that helped me in my pain was getting outside of myself and helping others.
yeah.
And I really felt that was my purpose. That is what this podcast is about. Do you see yourself, as you're explaining that to me, do you see yourself as a vessel to help heal those who have been through hard times and let them know that they're not alone?
Yeah, I think that's the I mean, I kind of had people push me in those directions
Mm,
um at times, and I really think like a big part of life is always giving back. um One thing that you know, I think someone who's dear to both of us, Love Freely, aka Sade, she um she said something recently, just kind of popped my mind. It just popped something into alignment. It was just like, you know, you can't like pour from your overfill, you know, not from the bottom of your cup. You know, and I think that learning
mm,
that lesson over time has allowed me to be present and stable in areas of my life while still being able to live in a way that is of frankly service. I mean, my dad was a man of service. He was a sober man for like 40 something years and helped a lot of people get clean and you know, make, like you said, putting people in positions to be able to make better choices for themselves. Um, and I think that's been something that's really kind of trickled down into like my DNA a little bit. One thing I heard someone say one time, like the worst thing you could do to somebody is to do something that allows them to, he said, lose their faith in humanity. But I think I can translate that to become mistrusting, to become skeptical, pessimistic about things because of something you did or something you said you would do and didn't do. So you start to create this sort of like you start to affect people in a way that is detrimental to them being present and able to fully live their life. I've had many periods in my life where I've been that that criminal or that robber that's robbed people of oh man, this guy let me down, or oh man, he said he would do that, he didn't do it, or oh man, that guy's a jerk. I've been that person many times. I think it's inevitable for a lot of people, but the ability to give back after periods of that time is super important, I think. And I think for me, the band is a way to restore faith in people's humanity who may have had losses or
Mm.
been negatively affected by relationships, people, places, and things, nouns, in their life that have come down on them in an unexpected or unforgiving way in some ways. So the band is sort of like, if you look at like the Alcoholics Anonymous, they have these sort of 12 steps. The eighth step is
Mhm.
sort of writing down your grievances that you've caused other people, and the ninth step is actually reaching out to them to make amends.
Mhm.
So in a lot of ways, the band kind of functions in that capacity for me sometimes, where it's like an opportunity to make amends. It may not be directly to the person or play people or situations from my past, but it allows fairness and balance to come back into the universe somehow. Because I think most energy and most things will find its natural balance at the end of the day.
I think that your band has a very spiritual aspect to it, and I think that that's a lot of that. I mean, where does that come from?
Life. No, I think that was an element of forming the band where it was like, uh I mean, when I moved back to Cleveland, it was blank canvas city. Like there was no frame, there was no paint. It was literally just a blank canvas. And
Where were you at when you moved to Cleveland?
like,
Emotionally, spiritually,
oh, bro,
everything.
bankrupt,
Oh, okay.
bankrupt in debt, on death row. Like I was, I was, I was about halfway down that Green Mile. I swear to life. But like, but coming back with that clean slate, I was like, what do I want to do with music? And like music, like we said, has been one of those sort of like reoccurring partners in moving through life a little bit in all situations. In 2014, like I fell back in love with music. Like I left doing theater and stuff like
Um,
like I fell back in love with like the art of the song and the
mhm,
power of the message, and started playing guitar again at that point. And then so kind of moved into that sort of area of writing and everything like that. But so when I moved back to C-Town, Cleveland Town in 2016, I kind of had this sort of revived feeling about what music could do spiritually for me.
mhm,
What it had done. It became the only thing that was my identity at that point. Um and it allowed me to feel like I had something useful and purposeful to bring to the world. So when I sat down in 2016 with myself for a couple of years in Cleveland, I thought, what type of project do I want? This is kind of funny. My friend asked me, like I said, I'm very green in a lot of ways, always. But like someone came up to me, they're like, so what's your project? I'm like, project. And I don't want to sound like cool. So I was like, I don't know. My project is a creative warrior project. It's this community event I had done back in Chicago. But he was really
okay.
asking, like, do you have a band? Are you writing music? Are you releasing a record? And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. So I went home after that. I was like, I gotta come up with a project now. I need to be able to tell them what my project is. So I sat down to figure out what type of music I want to do. I was like, well, I love blues music. I love singing blues music. It has that cathartic feel that I love.
Mm,
There's a freedom in it vocally, and was able to sit down, but I did not want to do blues music that sounded like blues music I grew up listening to. Didn't want to do blues music that, frankly, I have no business doing exact imitations of, because it's not, again, that authenticity. It's not authentic. Um, to be honest, it looks a little, it almost it does border on appropriation to a certain extent, depending on who's
okay.
perceiving it. But my perspective on it was not a good choice just to do straight up blues. And it's an easy, accessible way into music for me because I understand the form and the singing and the range of emotion and those types of things that come with it. but it was important, I think, for my life to not just sit in that sort of melancholy, wallowing element of music. And so I kind of thought, well, what's a higher idea? And this idea of spiritual awakening kept coming back. Stuff I've heard from my dad over years and stuff like that, and spending some times in and out of AA rooms and stuff like that, where I was like, this idea of like you have these aha moments, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when you follow these sort of guides for living or this program for life a little bit, you start to become more present to see how things are working out for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that element of a spiritual awakening or a higher idea sort of started to sort of wrap in with this idea of the lower energy of sadness and grief. So the idea of apostle was the message or the spiritual awakening, and the Jones was really just this element of just everyday everybody problems. So you get, so the idea
Oh.
was to create this sort of spiritual awakening around hard times, so that it wasn't just about the problem, but it was also about the possibility that comes from a different perception and embracing a higher a higher probability of things working out, you know, and that's accepting that there's a message in everything. I think that's accepting that there's a way to evolve past limitations that you feel you have or have had against you at certain points. So I think that there's like a lot of great, I think there's a lot of great elements around the music spiritually that comes from wanting to embrace the present and the future, if you will, and not
Mm-hmm.
being so stuck in the past, which is where I think a lot of joy gets trapped.
Mm, mm.
I said this little light of mine. I said this little light of
Some of your songs have really resonated with me and my family, by the way. I mean, my kids, they run around just singing 10-9-8.
That's
So
the song. Kids love that one. That's the deepest track.
it, well, it's so catchy. And you have some lyrics in there that I thought maybe you could talk more about,
Sure.
21 and on the run. And then you also say something about a different kind of grace. And I was wondering what you meant by that.
I was only 21. I was out there living, baby. I was on the run. I looked above and said, oh God, oh Lord, what had I done? So I counted down my faith just to find myself a different grace. And here I go, and here I go, alone.
Cool. So 21 on the run. So at 21, I was a pretty good guy in high school, you know, and good guy in my first couple of years of college. You know, I didn't really like dive into partying or anything like that. And around that 21 age, 22, 21, I started to really feel like I was on my own. I mean, I moved to Chicago when I was a teenager. And like I
Okay.
hadn't really ever, and I was really on my own from about like from 17, 18 on without any family around me. So
Because you went to college or
because I
what
was
was,
in Chicago, my family stayed in Cleveland. Eventually, they kind of went to South Carolina. Like we've been all now we're all back together, but over the course of the last 8 years. But like we spent a lot of time where we all drifted apart. So
okay.
around that time, like I was starting to experiment with a different way of being social and a different way of being out and about. That does include like drugs and drinking,
Mm,
going out and really embracing like a more party life. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about what is that normal, you know, like
mm-hmm.
without a clear idea of even as an artist or even as a gay man or even as like even as uh someone who's in school for theater, you know, like what do the next 3 years of my life look like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there's such an importance on networking and knowing people and the quality of the talent of the people around you, all those things were relevant. And I found a lot of that talent. So I kind of got pulled into a lot of those directions because that's where a lot of the energy was the greatest at the time for me. And I had
Mhm.
no other example, no other image, no other ideal of what to strive for or who to be in stride with at the time. I will say, like, I've nothing in my life I would go back and change at this point. But there was some stuff
Mhm.
that happened during that period that was just like a turning point where I feel like, okay, my idea of I can live forever, or I have the same sort of like freedom to dream about a perfect life of I could live into my 90s. I could live in I could have all these things that a lot of other people was sometimes I could perceive that comes easy for them, or they have parents that talk to them about finances growing up, or they understood a lot of
Mm.
these these facts for living in the type of society we live in that I just did not have. You know, I came from a work hard,
Mhm.
get it family. Um, you know, if you
Mhm.
don't know what to do for yourself, do something good for someone else, you know. So it's like, so around that time, finding that different so the 21 on the run speaks very specifically to that period of time where I felt like there was a distinct turn in how I thought the trajectory of my life would go. And I think around that time I knew it was going to be a little bit I had a more finite appreciation for things. Or I'd probably say it felt like a depreciation at that time about most things possible.
Mhm.
But again, just sort of this unlimited possibility of having this full life started to become a little bit more like, no, things are going to be a little bit more on a difficult path for you. So I was in a tense situation around the time, and the 1098 really comes out of this sort of I had never done any sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy things or anything like that,
Oh, got it.
where I just had never done anything like that. But I do know that I do know from working with veterans who struggle
Mm.
with PTSD and other
Yeah.
elements that come out of war situations, have this sort of tapping method they do sometimes to calm themselves down. If you're ever nervous talking in a situation, you know, calmly just tap your chest. It kind of brings you to center, like right here in this sort of like soft area of your
Mhm.
shoulder.
Mhm.
I didn't know that at the time. So instinctively, I almost started doing this thing where on my hand, I would go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I start on this finger, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then I start on this finger, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Wow.
Starting with the 9, 8. And I would do this over and over and over again,
It was
just
just
try to
it was calming.
but it was almost like, all right, this will be over, or I can get out of the situation, or things will be different. And it was like literally, but in this sort of like I wasn't in a K-hole. If you don't know what that is, baby, don't worry about it. But it was just like, but it wasn't, I was just sort of I felt like that iron butterfly situation where I was fully cognizant and aware in my head, but physically unable to move or
Um,
make a distinctive mood. So asking for a different grace is to really help get out of that place I was in, to in a more general way. But that 1098 was really came from that little countdown thing that
mm,
I would do. Maybe in 10 seconds, it'll all be over. And things will be good, you know, or if I close my eyes for 5 seconds and open it up, the boogeyman will disappear or something like that. I didn't see it. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's still freaking there. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's still there. So but I think so that those lyrics in that particular case are about feeling trapped in a space, um, and with no way out to a certain extent.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're almost done. I wanna get home.
you're going home, or, I mean, what are you
That was me
talking about when
literally.
you're talking about
I mean, that's
home?
more literal than anything. Let me get that out of here and let me get my ass home, like
Well, you always sing it towards the end of your concerts, most of
yeah,
the
I think
time.
that was it's such an emotionally um uh heavy song. I'm not saying it's like
Mm-hmm.
exhausting, but it's hard to sort of re-gear up after that
After that
tune.
song.
It's a good one to drop the mic on, if you will.
Got it.
But also the message is time to go home. It's a pretty good message. Hey, show's over. Time to go home, y'all. Let's again next time, shall we? So
You know, as a writer, it really helped me find my voice over time. Did you find yourself in those other kind of situations too, where you would just grab paper to pencil, pencil to paper and just start writing, and it would help you get through those tough times?
yeah, I mean, I actually still have all of my old journals. I
Okay.
have like probably I don't want to over exaggerate, but I don't want to undershoot it either. But I probably have about like 15 journals that are full of
Wow.
sketches and doodles and stress sketches and writings and everything like that. And when computers were little, when I had a computer that wasn't as sensitive as the one I have now, I could take it with me and I could sit down and open up notes memos and just type away. And I got away from that probably in about 2015 or so. Just got away from the writing and all that, from just the stream of conscious writing, if you will. Like I'm just gonna write until I just feel like I got all my feelings out. I'm not saying I got away from writing altogether, but doing that style of writing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then it started to switch into more songwriting at that point. So 2014 into 2015, about 10 years ago, I really started to switch from these sort of stream of conscious, long form idea, stress, relationship, emotional type of writing and stuff like that, and turned it into more attempts at writing songs and stuff like that. And I think that's really where it has carried. That idea is still how I write songs today, not through stream of conscious writing, but I just write. Um, so I'll often write our songs lyrically without the music. I write songs in two ways primarily, probably a third, but the two more interesting ways are um, I'll sit instead of I was noticing I was putting a lot of good content out on Facebook about how I felt about things or how I perceive these things in terms of posting and statuses and stuff like that. So I decided to pull off from that. And if something was triggering me emotionally, I would just write a little bit in my phone without any music, without an idea of a beat or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So then, add a Michael Habiray into the
Mm-hmm.
situation, or some of the earlier guitar players we had throughout the evolution of the band so far. Ooh, baby, just play a chord progression or something. I know what words will slide right over this nicely.
See.
We so we wrote Turn It Up, Repeat It Again that way. Superstar Disaster was written that way. We have a few new songs. One is that we're in the studio right now with. One's called Rover. Another one's called Ain't It the Truth. There's another song called Testing 1 2 3, kind of a play on 10 9 8, if you will.
Right. I
But
was,
I just realized that, how funny. But it's like but so that's one way that I love writing music, is just writing the words and filling it in. The second option that usually comes into play is we'll write them on the fly, right in front of people while we're doing like a 3 hour barbecue gig or something. So we have a new song called Some
awesome.
People, where I was like, ooh, this is gonna be good, isn't it?
What is it again? You broke up a
It's
sec.
called Some People.
Some people. Okay.
And the this was just happened last week before. We were kind of nearing a certain point in the gig where it didn't feel right to plug in a song. So like there's a nice energy. Let's stay at this level. Just so Michael came up with a wonderful chord progression. And sometimes in my phone I'll just write one lines like that kind of trigger an idea or can start this sort of like free form, free flow like
Mm-hmm.
language, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, around an idea or a feeling. I remember I didn't look at it at the time, but I remember this note. I can see it visually in my head. This is somebody's got to lose was the the line. That's just
Mm-hmm.
one note memo. Somebody's got to lose. So Michael started playing it, and the whole like, well, somebody's got to lose. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's you. Oh, do what you got to do. And then like, so we kind of start with that, and it starts off kind of vanilla, kind of like that's cute, da da da. Then it gets deeper and deeper. So I don't know. I would probably say if I were to give myself the credit of having a talent, one would be actually being able to verbally flow in the moment, and to actually get to something that's good. So eventually, out of that sort of like it's 13 minutes long, I know because I recorded it because I said Michael's gonna be good. Let me record this. So I went through and I
Wow.
transcribed all the words down so that we could get a sort of a lyric sheet for the song and recreate it. So that has been successfully done. So from well, somebody's gotta lose. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's you. So do what you got to do. Ended up becoming this one line in the song, and I love this line. It's like well, somebody's gotta climb to a view where they can fall from, to
Mm.
feel how it feels to fly, not to die, but to see a side of life that most people just pass by. You know, it's like so from this
Ooh.
kind of like entry level lyric, if you will, to something that has a little bit more poeticism to it and has a little bit more visual and richness around some like concepts of like jumping off the edge of a cliff or taking that
Mm.
dive or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of also spin it and to say, some people are out there like they're doing things because they want to feel something that most people are scared to feel. So I
Oh,
really love writing music that way. So it's been very fluid, especially with Michael
yeah.
Haberray. It's been tremendous,
Mm.
tremendous partner in crime when it comes to writing and creating music. And he's just so amiable and flexible and supportive in what he does as a guitar player. He has no problem that at least that he tells me of sitting back and really just holding down the groove. One of the only rules I have for the band in terms of a musical guide, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
is serve the song. If it doesn't, like I said, in 2014, I fell back in love with songs. Um, I don't have a favorite genre of music. I listen to a little bit of everything. Being able to kind of like serve the song means if it makes sense to not have like let's say keys on a song, that's cool. It's not about you not being a good keys player. The song is just better without it. If there's a song that serves better if one of the girls sings lead, guess what? It's better for that song. What
Mm.
makes best for that moment, for that song, and ultimately for the audience experience is to serve what is going to have the most impact, with the highest probability to change somebody or to uplift them or to make them feel inspired. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we walk around with such a low engine or low fuel tank of inspiration sometimes because a lot of it is like it's like those gas stations put water in the gasoline. It looks
Mm-hmm.
full, but that baby's going down real fast.
Well, one of the
Like
things I
we have a
love about,
lot of those fluffy like messages and mantras that are very encouraging sometimes. I'm not going to hold anything against them. But if that's your only fuel for life, you're constantly going to have to refuel. So I think putting some genuine inspiration by making the moments as great as they can be and
mm-hmm.
utilizing the talents of the people that have them and are willing to share them in a giving and fulfilling way for themselves and others is one of those things that I think really comes out of that serve the song method. When you can create those songs, you can create uniqueness and that more authentic feeling too.
One thing about your band is everybody takes center stage at some point.
As far as I'm concerned, if everyone's on stage, everyone's center stage, you know.
Yeah, that's how it appears as an audience member. You know, I wrote a book, and it was a while ago, but one of the things that I instantly related, the woman that I related to the most in the Bible was the sinful woman, just known for her sin. You know, she
That was her
wasn't,
name, the sinful
she
woman.
was known as the sinful woman in Luke 7. Yes.
Woo.
Um,
Talk
yeah,
about
I
it.
mean,
Not
she,
playing.
the
Sounds like
church
my friend.
leaders,
I think I know her. Not playing.
you do. Um, but anyway, the church leaders and everybody were just looking at her, and they're just pointing at her, and they're just say, you know, she's a sinful woman. Again, no name or anything. And I was also, I worked in the jail system for a stint, and the women in there, I loved them and I related so much with them. But one of the things that they would do is that they would see themselves for what they did. Or, you know, they'd just be like, hi, I'm so and so, and I'm a murderer, or I'm a prostitute. And that's how they saw themselves, as somebody in a moment in time, something that they did wrong. And that's their definition of themselves.
Yeah.
Or they allowed other definitions of themselves and shame and everything to overtake their own voices of themselves. Did you ever have other voices louder than yours to keep you from believing in yourself?